Greetings and welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to this very special event, the Sapan or South Asia Peace Action Network 5th anniversary event online. My name is Beena Sarwar and I'm a journalist and a filmmaker, and I'm the co-founder and curator of Sapan. Today, as we look around us and we see what's happening in the world around us, it makes it.
And welcome everyone.
Sorry, there's an echo there.
To this very special event, the Sapan or South Asia Peace Action Network.
Pragya, can you mute that? Because I'll start again, because I'm getting the echo from the YouTube.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start again. And when we do the YouTube, we can cut that first part out.
Yes, yes.
Yeah?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Right. Greetings and welcome everyone to this very special event, the 5th anniversary of Sapan, the South Asia Peace Action Network. Which we launched on the last Sunday of March 2021. My name is Beena Sarwar. I'm a journalist and filmmaker, and I'm the co-founder and curator of Sapan. We started Sapan with a simple question. If France and Germany can be part of the EU, why can't we have a South Asia Union, or at least a region with soft borders where people can trade, travel, meet, innovate, and collaborate? We forge our own narrative rather than reacting to that of others. And that is even more important now as we see the horrific violence in the world around us on various pretexts. And what can we do? I think it is even more imperative for us to hold on to our humanity, to hold space for each other, which is what this event is titled, and to be there for each other, to build spaces for dialogue, for empathy, and for understanding. That, I think, is really the most important thing that we can do right now. Keep doing our work and keep holding these spaces for ourselves and for each other. And along those lines, I'm really delighted, we're all really delighted to have with us this event led by some wonderful young women from around the region. And I'm going to hand it over to one of them now, the event host, Sushmita Preetha, a journalist, a peace activist, and organizer in Dhaka. So Preetha, over to you, and thank you so much for being with us, all of you.
Thank you so much, Beena. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sapan's 5th anniversary event. I'm truly honored to be your host today. 5 years. It's hard to believe and even harder to summarize. During this time, we've survived a once-in-a-generation pandemic. We've watched economies strain under severe debt and inflation. We've seen climate disasters return again and again, familiar and still unsettling in their scale. We've witnessed moments of mass uprising that opened up new political space only to run into familiar forms of control. And at times, we've confronted the very real possibility of war in our region, to say nothing of the long-standing violence and unresolved realities in places like Kashmir, Myanmar, Balochistan, or the Chittagong Hill Tracts. Over the last 5 years, public life in our countries has felt increasingly brittle, with intolerance and polarization settling in more deeply. Dominant powers have continued to recast complex societies into narrow identities that are easier to manage and, by extension, easier to mobilize. Across the region, governments have leaned more heavily into discourses that turn neighbors into adversaries and difference into threat. And all of this is unfolding as we watch in real time the devastation of war and genocide in other parts of the world. It is no wonder that so many of us feel worn down, wondering about the pointlessness of it all, sometimes unsure of what to even hold on to or how to sustain our solidarities. And I think this is precisely why Sapan is so important, because it insists on making space for hope and connection across borders, even when it is difficult, even when it is discouraged. Personally, it has been an invigorating experience for me to meet so many inspiring people from across the region. It has given many of us a great comfort to know that we're not alone in our struggles and in our hopeless desire to create a more just world. Given what's unfolding in our region and the world at large, today feels less like a celebration in the usual sense and more like a moment to pause, to take stock of what has been built and what it has taken to build it, and to remind ourselves why this work matters, especially now. Thank you all for being here and for being part of this in whatever ways you are. We traditionally begin our event by honoring those whose legacy we take forward, as well as remember those who departed over the past month. They devoted their entire lives for peace building in the region. We'll have a moment of silence to honor some of these legendary figures. Bilal, our volunteer in London, if you could kindly play the video. Thank you. That was very moving. And now a small presentation on Sapan and what it does. Bilal, if you could play the video again. Thank you. And thanks Sarah Arshad and Duai Iman for both these presentations. As you saw, the Sapan Charter calls on the governments and peoples of South Asian nations to institute soft borders to allow freedom of trade and travel to each other's countries, ensure human rights and dignity for all citizens, including religious and ethnic minorities, cooperate in areas particularly to public health, culture and legal reform, education, environment, climate change, etc. It is on the website at southasiapeace.com. We invite you to take a look and endorse the Charter if you haven't already done so. Now, let's also take a quick look at what Sapan News has been doing. Pragya, will you play the video, please?
Yeah.
Ragya, do you mind doing it again with the music? With the sound?
Music is not audible.
No. Yeah, I think you have to click the thing for optimizing sound. Sorry, everyone, because the music is really lovely. Just stop share and start again with the.
Is it audible now?
No. I think when you when you play the video, there should be a check sound, optimize sound. That's what Bilal did. We rehearsed.
Pragyan, if you start the screen share again, and then on the side of the screen on the bottom right, it should say optimize sound sharing. Hopefully it works now.
One second. Where is this optimized sound? Because when we earlier played it, it played perfectly.
Bilal, you're muted.
When you press share screen, it comes up to a screen where content only as background are the options. Under it, it should be share sound optimized for video sharing.
Got it. Oh,
Thanks, Bilal.
No.
thank you.
Thanks to Sapan News Associate Editor Pragya Srivastava for the presentation. We now come to a conversation that is unfolding in real time across South Asia. Young people, as we know, are coming of age in the shadow of political upheaval, economic uncertainty, and increasingly fragile democratic institutions. But they're also more politically visible than any generation before them. As we've seen most recently in Nepal and Bangladesh and earlier in Sri Lanka, Gen Z is actively reshaping how democracy is imagined and contested. At the same time, they're navigating a very complex landscape: the rise of misinformation, the pressures of hypervisibility online, growing polarization, and in some contexts, the proximity of conflict. So, what does democracy look like through the eyes of young people today? What patterns are emerging across countries like Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Bangladesh, and where do their experiences diverge? To explore these questions, we're joined by three young journalists from across the region. We have with us Natasha Gooneratne, founder of Perspective South and specialist in public diplomacy and international law from Colombo. From Dhaka, we're joined by Naziba Basher, senior sub-editor at the Daily Star and host of the talk show That's What She Said. And from Kathmandu, we have Pratibha Tuladhar, journalist, educator, and Nepali Times columnist. Thank you for joining us today. I leave it to you three to take it from here.
Thank you so much, and it's great to be here today and to be with the network. Maybe me being from Sri Lanka, maybe I can just start off the conversation if that's okay. As you may remember, Sri Lanka was titled in international media as the first domino to fall when the protests started. And I thought that was very interesting. And maybe I can actually start from that point. It was not the point that I wanted to start from, but I think after listening to Beena and listening to the work that Sapan is doing, the discussion of moving away from generalized narratives, I think it's an important place to start. Because the fact that Sri Lanka was called the first domino to fall in international media just really made it very clear that a lot of people for a long time had understood that this was coming. And that was not particularly the local narrative or the local understanding. Even now, if you have certain conversations here that we have among friends, but if you meet a Sri Lankan, the conversation will always go into an understanding of it being due to government negligence, corruption. These are all thematic words that would pop up. But what I thought was interesting at that point in time, and my organization, Perspective South, some of the work we had done, we had read a UNDP report in 2022 that had actually discussed that the ramifications of COVID-19 and also the Ukraine-Russia conflict would result in what was happening with Sri Lanka would result in that exact state for at least 106 other developing nations, so global South countries, of course. And I thought that was very important to start there because it was really a prophesying. And I think it was the head of UNDP at the time, I can't remember his name exactly, but Steiner was his surname. And he said it very interestingly. He said, when mass populations, when they feel problems related to economy, they look for agency on the streets. And that is how protests come about. And it is national governments that will feel the brunt of that. But there was really no understanding at that point in time, and I'm not sure if there still is, about the global powers that really gave way to the situations that we in the global South were feeling. And I wanted to start from this point because it is an important time right now, because we are definitely facing something again in the global South as a result of global powers. So maybe I'll just end there and hand it over to my other speakers, and then we'll circle back.
Hi, I'm Naziba Basher from Bangladesh. I work at the Daily Star as a senior sub-editor. Because right after Sri Lanka, I believe the Dhaka uprising, the July uprising, was well, basically the next domino to fall. In that sense, I do agree that what Natasha has said, that of course the COVID-19, I believe, had exposed a lot of economic vulnerabilities in the developing nations, which did trigger much of this, especially in Sri Lanka, as we know that the economic crisis was the main driver behind the entire uprising. But in Dhaka, though, it was a little bit different, even though the nature of the uprising and the nature of how all of it unfolded was very similar to what happened in Sri Lanka. But in Bangladesh, the uprising started from a protest against a particular policy, which was a discriminating policy, or so it was told. It began because of a government job quota that was promised to the children and grandchildren of freedom fighters, and that they would have an advantage in acquiring government jobs. And so it started as a policy protest, an anti-policy protest, which then, you know, it unfolded. And then, of course, there was, I believe this is also similar with Nepal and Sri Lanka, when the police brutality began against protesters, against the youth, against the Gen Z protesters. That is when it actually it turned into a mass movement, and then it turned into an uprising, and then ultimately the regime fell. So I think there is, of course, like Natasha said, that the economic vulnerabilities did trigger much of this, but I think the nature of all three uprisings had a little differing factor. In Nepal also, I believe that corruption was very much behind the uprising. So I would also like to listen to Pratibha when she talks about, and she is watching a new regime come into power right now. It's happening as we speak. So I would also want to know the current situation in Nepal right now from Pratibha.
Thank you very much, Natasha and Naziba, for setting the tone for this conversation. Yes, I am indeed sitting here in Kathmandu, all of us sitting here in Nepal, watching the new regime take its seat and begin its work as was expected when we had this election and the new government was announced. And as all of you, I'm sure you all have been watching how interesting, I will call it interesting, how interesting things have been here in Nepal with the new prime minister, who is the youngest prime minister for Nepal, just taking over. And I feel that at this point, maybe it becomes important for us to look back a little bit into Nepal's political history so that we can set things into context. So if you remember, Nepal became a federal democratic republic after transitioning from monarchy, right? After a popular people's movement in 2006. And so democracy is relatively young in Nepal. But I think something we have in common with Sri Lanka and Bangladesh is also the fact that Nepal is a country with a very big youth population. And so like the proportion of Gen Z youth voters is really big in this country, and which is something we were able to witness with the recent election, which won landslide victory for RSP, the party that the new prime minister represents, which was quite surprising for even like seasoned political analysts. It was not something we expected. So that has been something that the Gen Z movement kind of ushered in, which has been quite unexpected in terms of how we were looking at Nepal's politics. But what really led to this then? That's something we have to, I think, again, look back into Nepal's history to understand. So Nepal has always been riddled with like fractious politics, because there was a lot of squabbling among the politicians forever with we had three main parties that were in leadership for the past about 2 decades, right? And they were always squabbling among each other, which always led to instability in terms of how the government was functioning in Nepal. And that gave way to corruption, unemployment, weak governance, you name it. And so over the years, that had been leading to a lot of dissatisfaction among the youth. And I think with the kind of changes we have now in place because of the advent of social media and because it's accessible, especially to the youth, it has suddenly changed the mode of how we communicate and talk about politics now. And so while in the past we did not see so much involvement of youth in politics, that completely changed because of social media. And maybe I can I was reading this article a couple of days ago by C.K. Lal, a political analyst, and please allow me to sort of use a quote from his article here. So he talks about how the way the new parties now approach their voters has become really, really different. And he said something like, what distinguishes the RSP, which is the party that the new prime minister leads now. So he says, what distinguishes the RSP is the nature of its connection to the masses. Its messages live streamed rather than endlessly debated in television talkathons, which is what we saw in the past, right? That's how the older parties governed. They always went through televised messaging, which was mostly also a lot of horse trading in Nepal's context. I'd love to hear how it is in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. So he also says, C.K. Lal also says, while legacy media struggles to build depth and understanding, social media achieves breadth and belief at the speed of impression, bypassing the filters of reason. So that has been both interesting, a little bit dangerous, but also quite challenging. But it has also been something that's led to this really interesting and unexpected change in the context of Nepal. I think we are eventually going to move into a conversation where we also talk about how the media has played a role in what has transpired in the region, right? So maybe I'd love to hear more from Natasha and Naziba on this. But for now, I'm going to take a pause, and yeah, maybe we can go to Natasha now.
Thank you, Pratibha. Yes, definitely. Let's get into that conversation. Maybe I can couple it with a few other themes for keeping this maybe a little shorter. Our discussion, definitely, there is the role of the media, which is so important. And since we're talking about Sapan, and the emphasis on peace, I want to maybe share a few thoughts regarding the Sri Lankan context. So Sri Lanka is a aging population. So Gen Z is still a large segment, but maybe not as large as Nepal or maybe even Bangladesh. But it was interesting, the protests here, because what we were seeing, and I was covering the story for Swedish public media and Finnish broadcasting at that time, who were actually doing documentaries. So we had to actually go to the protest sites morning and evening. And what was interesting to me was, and this might be the same for both of you, you were seeing very diverse social groups sharing the same space in a way that they might not usually do in that sense. And for me, it was unusual and it was inspiring. Also, social media really brought that all together, because regardless of the divisions that there might be in society itself, they were coming together based on certain points that they wanted accountability for. So that was interesting in the way they came together. Now, what I want to couple this with, and I'd love to hear your views on it, is with regard to the violence. So violence in the form of mob violence broke out in May, I think May 9th for Sri Lanka. And that resulted in the official residence of the Prime Minister being breached by the mob. There were different homes of ministers that were burnt. There was actually one minister who was killed through this. And when that happened, you could see those previous invisible lines of division coming up, in the sense of people saying, oh no, those are not our guys. Those are not our guys, and then the divisions took place. And I really think that in the first few weeks of visiting the protests and actually looking at it, it was actually culturally also something beautiful, I have to say. During the April period is when we have Sinhalese and Tamil New Year, and they're actually celebrating out there in the protest sites. And then soon after that, you could see a sort of darkness that was taking root. And I want to just emphasize on this solely because I think there's an algorithm of hate. This is something that I've talked about on many of our portals as well. There's an algorithm of hate on social media. Of course, we know that, and we know about confirmation biases, but I think there's also an algorithm of hate in the conversations we have, in the sort of confirmation biases that we have with different networks that we speak with. And I think there needs to be a greater awareness of that. Of course, in the Sri Lanka story, I think it ended quite well, as you might already see. But I would love to hear also your views in terms of this aspect of the violence and how it changed things. Thanks. So over to you.
In Bangladesh, like I said, that the entire the protest, it actually turned into a mass uprising, and then everything unfolded because of the violence. Actually, it started from the uprising itself. But what was the violence actually continued way into the aftermath, but we saw the mobs starting right at the end of the uprising. I believe the mobs started forming when, like in Sri Lanka, the groups broke into Gana Bhavan and the parliament building and all of that. That happened, and I will be lying if I'm saying that it wasn't expected. It was somewhat expected that that would happen, but the thing is that that is also similar, I believe, with Nepal and Sri Lanka, is that is when the divisions started coming in. That is when protesters themselves started saying that these weren't our people. And that also happened when the police, they were also attacked because of, as a retaliation to the brutality that they unleashed during the protests. So there were police stations set on fire, there were police that were attacked and killed, and a lot of the there was a blame game going on in the middle. And then after the interim government came into power on August 8th of 2024, we did think that we would have perhaps a period of stability. We knew that it was a huge task for an interim government, especially a government that was filled with people that weren't in government positions before. And many of them were actually rights activists. They were NGO workers. And so we knew that it would be a difficult task for them. However, at some point, there was perhaps a sense of negligence, I would say, on their part. And there were certain groups that were repressed during the Awami League government that was toppled. And those groups kind of empowered themselves during the interim government, and the violence continued for 18 whole months. And the mob attacks began increasingly common. As a matter of fact, my own office, the Daily Star, was a victim, along with the Daily Prathamalo, of a mob attack. And the media, in fact, was coming under attack from the uprising itself. There was, of course, a particular reservation of the protesters against media that were biased during the fascist regime. However, that hatred did continue and did spill over after everything that happened, after everything unfolded. And that too was, I believe, because the media itself, while we want the media to be perceived as, the people's friend, the public informer, the public themselves actually have varying views of how they want to see the media, how they want to perceive the media. So there are people who want the truth. There are people who think we deserve to know the truth, but then there are a section of people who want to know the truth, their version of the truth. They want their narratives to be put into the media. And so that is still something that I think Bangladesh is grappling with. Bangladesh is still confused about how the media should perform and who they should perform for. And but I think it came into question through this uprising. It came, the media's performance, media's responsibility came into question through this uprising, and that is a question that we're still trying to answer. But coming back to what Pratibha said, the role of social media was huge for the Gen Z. It was almost a non-lethal tool for the Gen Z during the uprising and afterwards as well. But it was also a tool that was misused and also very widely abused. And that is also something that Bangladesh is still struggling with. And I think many South Asian countries are still struggling with to actually know how to use social media responsibly. And I would also like to know Nepal's experience from here. So Pratibha, over to you.
There are so many parallels I can draw from everything you just said, Naziba. And so like everything from the way the movement panned out with attacks on police stations to the Nepo baby trend, right, which was inspired by the protest in Indonesia and the Philippines. Everything else you said about the violence on the streets, that has been something we've seen every time there's been a street protest that has toppled the government in Nepal. So, of course, like every time there's a protest, violence is expected. And we also saw this just yesterday because after the arrest of the former Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli, his supporters took to the streets. And then what's also happening now, in addition to the violence on the streets, is that there is a lot of violence on social media as well, which we also know as trolling, right? So there's a lot of trolling every time somebody takes to the social media, says something, or somebody saying something or doing something is posted. And one of the things that has been really commonly seen is supporters are now what's the word? I can't exactly find the word, but now we see like there's a clash between supporters on social media and they're trolling each other. And some of these speeches are like hate speech and it's really violent. And of course, it's really difficult to take control of that now because out in the social media, everyone is like there's this opportunity to be quite wild and uncontrolled, right? But I think going back to the media responsibility, it's also important to sort of look back and see what kind of role media has really played. If you talk about, if you want to examine the kind of role Nepali media has played in how politics has panned out in Nepal, especially legacy media, in the past, we saw that they were almost partisan, like they were functioning like political party cadres because the only way you could actually get news out of the political party system was if you were close to the parties. So of course that was important, but it was also it's also true that there were sort of giving so much bandwidth to the political parties for the horse trading or whatever it is that they were doing for their eccentricities. They were actually amplifying their eccentricities. So instead of holding them to account, they were actually letting the political parties use their footage to actually sort of promote themselves, right? And that, I think, was such a dangerous trend. And with the social media, that's going to, I think, increase fourfold because now we also have independent journalists as well as journalists who are affiliated with legacy media as well, already taking sides and sort of posting stories that are now not just sound bites, but also quoted in terms of how music is being used to give it a certain kind of color, because just like the same footage can be either made to sound like a horror movie scene or like a comic scene based on what kind of music you're using, right? You can also do that with footage on social media now. And that's exactly what I see is panning out on social media here in Nepal. And that trend is, of course, really, it's sort of dangerous because there are all these young people out there who are recipients of this kind of messaging. So I feel like we're in a really fragile place, especially because right now Nepal is also just looking out to this new government that has a really big responsibility on its shoulders of taking care of millions of migrant workers who are employed in the Middle East, as you know, with all the with the war panning out now. But there's also this other responsibility it has to fulfill of being a responsible, inclusive government, because as you're aware, Nepal is a casteist society. We follow the caste system, right? And if you look at the way the government formation is now showing, there's a very small Dalit population in the parliament, and there are just 5 women in the parliament. There are just 5 women ministers who just recently took the oath of office, which is only like part of the 33% reservation that the reservation quota, the 33% reservation quota is just met, but it's almost like tokenism. So we are in this really fragile place right now, and I think media is going to have a really big role to play with all the chaos sort of spiraling out right now. But I think what we can do and we have to do is to hope. And I think to keep doing our work and to make sure that media holds the leaders accountable. Yeah, I think I have to stop there because we're probably running out of time, or
Yeah, we are running out of time, so maybe just a few closing thoughts. But those were amazing thoughts, Naziba and Pratibha. I maybe would like to add in terms of Sri Lanka. I don't know if this is the same for you, but you also see differences in the media depending on if it's English medium media or local languages. And so it speaks to this idea of what Naziba talked about, truth, and people getting upset because their truth is not told. And so it goes to the question of what is truth, you know. And I find it very interesting that we could sit here and we can talk about these very complex issues from all of our countries, but we speak about it from different points of view. And I think that's really what's needed, because there is no one truth, perhaps, you know. There are different perspectives to any conflict, any situation. These are complicated times. And yeah, hope is all we can hope for. I will perhaps end with that if there are any closing thoughts from both of you. Thank you.
I pretty much have similar closing notes. At the end of the day, all 3 of our countries are going through massive changes, and a lot is still left to be seen. A lot is still left to, speculate. But yeah, a hope is all we have left as citizens, as journalists, whatever you say. We can only hope that someday the aspirations of whatever that has unfolded someday is met. But yeah, good luck to us.
Pratibha, do you
Pratibha,
want
if
to
you
say
would give
anything or
some
say
closing
anything?
notes.
I think Natasha and Naziba have already spoken for me, and yes, I do think it's really important in terms of how a conversation like this can be like a tool to create some sort of I am really running out of words right now, but to create some sort of platform, if I may use that word, to see how and where we can find that thread of hope, you know, and to sort of support each other in terms of doing the work that we do, because our work sometimes is also highly dependent on how the region views the work we do, right? For instance, I remember a couple of months ago, Beena, and I think Beena, you had initiated this. So there was this letter of appeal to the governments between Pakistan and India to allow each other's I think Beena can eventually add more to this, but to allow each other to access their media, which I think is one of the things a platform like this has to do, because to open up each other's works to each other is, I think, also a start to looking at how we can actually build a support system within the region. So I think something like that kind of initiative is really great as well. Sorry, that's a longish closure, but yes, now I'm done. Thank you very much. Lovely talking to the two of you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Pratibha,
Thank
Naziba, and
you.
Natasha.
Thank you.
Thank you for a very insightful and lively discussion about this post-truth moment we seem to be inhabiting. Because we're running out of time, I won't recap what you just said. We'll now turn to the next segment and to someone whose work speaks directly to the theme we're engaging with today, countering oppression, violence, and the Epstein mindset. It's a real privilege to introduce Ruchira Gupta. Ruchira is an author and a lifelong activist working to end sex trafficking. Many of you will know her books, I Kick and I Fly and The Freedom Seeker. She's also an Emmy-winning documentarian and the founder of Apne Aap, an organization she built alongside survivors from her film, The Selling of Innocence. She is also teaching at NYU. She's doing so many great things. Ruchira, we're honored to have you with us today. Please take it from here.
Thank you, Sushmita, and thank you, Beena and Sapan. I'm just so happy to be in this group of so many old friends and now new friends. And I want to just give a shout out to Pratibha, Natasha, and Naziba for bringing us together for this really timely conversation. Because what Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka teach us is that a youth uprising can shake and even remove an old order, but also it does not automatically create a just democracy. If young people do not build institutions of their own, then older forces will step in. And they could be bureaucrats who know how to run the system, the party machines, as you spoke about legacy media and stuff, religious groups, as we are seeing in our own South Asia and many of the countries that you spoke about today, oligarchs even, who could be controlling what happens in our countries from far away through even foundations and NGO money coming in. And all those we know who operate behind the scene. So the warning is this: the street cannot create the moral force of change. It can create it, sorry, but the organized machine can still come forward and inherit it. So the fall of a regime is only the beginning. The deeper question is who captures the future after the uprising? And that is something that will take me now to what I want to really talk about to all of you is the Epstein moment. Because as you know, I've been working against sex trafficking and sexual violence for nearly 3 decades now. And like many of you, I began life as a journalist. And I was covering a campaign to destroy the Babri Masjid. And I was attacked at that time for being on the spot inside the mosque in jeans and a shirt, because I definitely did not look like a car sevak. And I came back and told the leader of that movement that they're attacking women and journalists. I escaped very narrowly with my life and without being raped, but being sexually assaulted while being attacked as well. And what I understood in that moment when I started testifying to the Librehans Commission of Inquiry and the Bahari Tribunal and Press Council of India was the misogynistic nature of hierarchy and political authoritarianism. Because in that time, I was asked questions by a battery of lawyers who were from the VHP, Bajrang Dal, BJP, RSS. Why should a girl from a good family speak about what happened to her? I, of course, was strong enough to say the shame was theirs, not mine. But also, did I believe in God? Did I worship any gods? Did I smoke cigarettes? Did I have male friends? I wasn't fully equipped with everything at that time because I did not understand that these questions would be coming. But in answering those questions in those tribunals and later in society, questions like where are my scratch marks? Why did I stand up to people from my own religion? Was I doing it for publicity? It taught me about how our testimonies are trivialized, marginalized, how we are silenced. I didn't even have the vocabulary then about gaslighting or things like that. That vocabulary we know now. But anyway, it built this ability to see beyond what was the messaging that I was getting. And it was at that time that I went off into Nepal and to escape from all this nonsense going on in Delhi. And when I was in Delhi, I actually, when I was in Nepal, I'm trekking in the hills and I came across rows of villages which didn't have any girls from age 15 to 45. And I began to ask the question, where are the girls? And funnily enough, that question led me to make a documentary, The Selling of Innocence, and I won an Emmy. I set up an NGO called Apne Aap, which works in red light areas in India. But also it led me to asking the same question now. 40 years later, I'm still asking that question, where are the girls? When I read the Epstein files, because there's kind of a eerie similarity from the questions that I was asked during the Liberhans Commission inquiry to the questions I was asked when I set up Apne Aap. And I would go to different foundation heads and ask them, what is your policy to combat sex trafficking? What are you doing for the girls in the red light areas? To the questions that are being asked by so many survivors in the Epstein trials, and the similarity even about the responses, which is what I was discussing with Beena. And I said, we really must speak about it because there's such a through line between patriarchy and authoritarianism that I have experienced, witnessed, and begun to analyze. So I would say that, the Epstein files are still unfolding as I speak. Everything hasn't come out, but we know that he was running a proven sex trafficking enterprise. He was definitely money laundering and there was corruption. He was maybe part of an espionage network. He had broad elite access across multiple sectors and countries. He had so many different kinds of relationships, from the girls that he was violating to people who he was enabling, who were enabling him. And then to all the sectors that he was able to build, to create this web that eventually led to his own murder and is still now going to topple more people than Andrew. So, we do know that Epstein ran a sex trafficking and sexual abuse operation. We do know Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted for helping recruit, groom, and traffic underage girls for Epstein. We do know there was banking facilitation. We do know JP Morgan paid $290 million. We know Deutsche Bank paid $75 million. We know Bank of America has paid $72.5 million. We know that UBS continued to move money for Ghislaine Maxwell even after Epstein's arrest. And, the blackmail still remains a major allegation. Murder is not established, even though more evidence is coming forward. Then, there's murder of Epstein, but there are also questions about murders of some of the girls through journals that are emerging now. There's no public proof of espionage, but links to a foreign country and not just UK and France, but to Israel coming forward. Then, of course, corruption at the highest level, which is even up to the Nobel Peace Prize Committee and the former Norwegian Prime Minister. We do know about that, including a former French diplomat, Fabrice. Banks, politics, academia, and we were heartbroken to read about Noam Chomsky's name, but especially people like Larry Summers, and how girls were being admitted that Epstein was abusing into colleges. So creating this culture, and I have students in NYU who were Epstein victims. I have colleagues who were given jobs in the UN, who were Epstein girls, and whatever the chain is. Even tech, philanthropy, and industry, Bill Gates has come forward, and so many more. Just recently, yesterday at the rally against Trump, there were people who were walking with the names of all the Epstein victims one by one, but also of the Epstein perpetrators. Law, fashion, diplomacy, business, everything is there. And yet, what we notice is that people are distancing themselves from the problem in very, very creative ways. So, what we can see is that, Gates will go and apologize to his foundation and say that, I'm sorry I brought you, I went on the Epstein planes. But at the same time, he says that he saw nothing, he did nothing. And what does that really mean? And he distances himself from the problem while giving a kind of a technical apology to his foundation, in which he says that I had an affair with two women who were rocket scientists. But later, the Epstein emails reveal that those women were being paid for by Epstein, and Epstein wrote an email to Gates saying that, are you going to give me the money back that I paid to them? And did they become rocket scientists and, scientists, professionals after Gates had used them or not? So the basic idea about commodification of women, the violence done to women, that was never addressed by all these powerful people. And what Gates said was then said by other powerful people, including Bill Clinton and others. I saw nothing. You can see very clearly that the woman sitting in the tub with him is Ghislaine Maxwell. So there is a power elite at work. And that power elite has been normalizing sexual violence for each other. And what does that do? Why did I want to talk about it today with all of you who we are all attacking authoritarianism? We all are attacking this fascism, which is growing not in South Asia so rapidly that we really don't take it, we don't even know what to do with it. And my understanding is that Epstein is not just a criminal case. He is a criminal case, but he's also a mirror because he reveals a mindset that has long lived beneath our institutions, our politics, even our language. A mindset that says some human beings, usually the most vulnerable girls, exist to be used. A mindset that treats power as entitlement, a mindset that rationalizes exploitation as consent, hierarchy as order, and domination as inevitable. And I faced this in my own work when I began Apne Aap. I wasn't a trained social worker. And luckily, therefore, because I was a journalist, I just saw things as is. And I was seething from all the responses to the Babri Masjid attack. So I remember there was a woman in Sonagachi who came to me saying that she had been really mutilated inside a brothel and she wanted to escape. So I said, of course, I can help you start a new life, connect you to a bank account, find you housing. And she said, I can't escape because the brothel manager and pimp are holding my son hostage and I don't know where he is. And therefore, then I said, let's go to the police and we'll file a police complaint on your behalf and get your son out. And this is the strangest thing which happened, because when I went to the police station, I was told that we cannot file a complaint against that pimp and that brothel keeper because they are quote unquote peer educators under the Gates funded AIDS prevention program. And so then I was really upset and I went to that Gates funded AIDS prevention program. It was a twin program supported by an NGO in Calcutta called DMSC, run by Dr. Jana, and the West Bengal State AIDS Control Society, which was a Ministry of Health program. I found that both were given money by Gates. Gates had created a whole web of organizations that he was funding for AIDS prevention to the tune of $363 million, funding our Ministry of Health, funding the National AIDS Control Organization, funding UNAIDS, funding the Public Health Foundation of India, funding our state AIDS control societies, and funding 23 intermediary organizations, CARE, World Vision, etc., who then funded 126 NGOs. So he created this whole echo chamber of organizations that he was funding with the same aim and the same program design, which was basically designed by McKinsey and the same team which has created the opioid crisis right now in America. And basically, the program design was to protect male buyers from disease rather than protecting the women and girls from male buyers by hiring pimps and brothel keepers to become peer educators, to distribute condoms, never mind what happened to the women and girls. So as I unraveled this and I ran to DMSC and I ran to the DMSC people said, oh, no, 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 this woman is not a victim. This is her choice. They all are sex workers. I said, but she's saying she wants to escape. She wants her son back. They said, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. It's a union. Then I ran to the head of the National AIDS Control Organization of India in Delhi, who was a friend of mine, an old union hand. And she said, Ruchira, I have an AIDS control program to manage. Forget what's happening to the girls. You go look after the girls. And then I began to ask for an appointment with the head of Gates Foundation. I did manage to meet the head of Gates Foundation in India. And he said, they are not victims, they are sex workers. This is their choice. It's a better choice than being in domestic servitude or in construction. And, we have to protect people from AIDS. We are a public health organization. And I said, what about the public health of women and girls? Are they disposable? And he said, I can't help you with that. At least we are mitigating the harm. And then I said, okay, what about helping to at least pull the children out of the red light area and put them into schools? And he said, but they are children of prostitutes. How do we know that they will finish school? And this is Ashok Alexander. And he said also that, you don't understand the idea of choice. So I said, actually, what I see is absence of choice, not choice. And this is neither sex nor work. This is sexual exploitation. And how can we, as people who have supported labor movement, see it as work when there is body invasion, which is inherent to this work? So he didn't listen. He said, we do health, we don't do education. Men will be men. If prostitutes don't exist, girls from good families will be raped. So I created more of a sting globally. I came to America, started talking about it. I met Ken Roth, the head of Human Rights Watch, and he said that if life in a brothel, Ruchira, is better than life on the sidewalk. And I remember asking him, how did he know? Sitting in the office in Empire State Building, whether life in a brothel was better than life in a sidewalk. And this echo chamber literally created the same things that Gates is now using to absolve himself from guilt, which is that this is a choice, this is sex work, and there is a difference between trafficking and prostitution. They don't really look underage. All the things I've heard all these years, and including inside the United Nations, where the UN had passed a protocol to end trafficking in persons, and that protocol called on countries to address the demand for human trafficking. But because so much funding to the UN came from the Gates Foundation, they too began compromising on their own agreed upon protocol by issuing statements not on letterhead, because that would not be legal, saying that pimps and brothel keepers enable employment and sex work is a choice and we stand by sex workers. So literally changing how we think of exploitation, that's what is at stake here, because it normalized the exploitation of some people by calling it work. It normalized the idea of harm by putting it under choice, which all the labor movements had tried to do away with. And then I began to think deeper about it. When authoritarianism and Trump and all of this and the sexual violence starting from Stormy Daniels and now the war in Iran, just as the Epstein files began to come out, I began to think more deeply about it. And I feel that the more we normalize exploitation and hierarchy at home, we are going to be able to and will keep normalizing exploitation and hierarchy outside the home. Because as you know, it's at home, inside the family, as soon as we are born, that we learn about hierarchy. We think it's all right for one class of human beings to order and one to obey, one to seek approval for their work and one to give approval for their work. And gender digs that trench inside our brain, into which then when we go out into the world, we start accepting all other hierarchies. So we accept the hierarchy of race or caste and other hierarchies because we have normalized the idea of hierarchy. We have also normalized the idea of sexual domination, and in some homes inside family, sexual violence, because we are told to keep quiet about it, that this is okay, it happens, in different ways and layers. And then we go out into the world accepting it, plus the idea of the head of the family, that, he is right, come what may, the man. And then we go out into the world wanting a head of state, right or wrong, who's going to replicate that model of power, because that's what we are comfortable with. So now,
Ruchira,
yeah, is
I'm
it too
so
long?
sorry. It's a bit long, so if you could wrap up in the next couple of minutes, is that
Yeah,
okay?
I'm done actually. So I can actually stop now. But what I want to say is, because we have failed to do, tackle these things and normalized it because some big foundation was giving money and creating an echo chamber, what that has done is also changed our attitude to exploitation, harm, labor practices, and hierarchy and authoritarianism itself. And because it's normalized inside ourselves, it's creeping into our movements, our institutions, and our language. And if we want, this is the moment to address it. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation today. And I told Beena that let's get down to it and see how can we distangle patriarchy. And by uprooting patriarchy, maybe we can uproot fascism and authoritarianism.
Well, thank you so much, Ruchira. I really like that connection that you made between the violence in our homes and how we're normalizing it, and that's also seeping into our movements and seeping into the way we relate to each other and also to the government at large. We now move to the closing segment. It's a pleasure to invite Dr. Dayani Panagoda to present the closing resolution. Dr. Panagoda is a leading voice in reconciliation and women-led development in Sri Lanka with extensive experience in peace building and policy work. She currently serves as director of the Institute of Monitoring and Evaluation and has contributed to key national efforts on post-conflict recovery and women, peace and security. We're honored to have her with us. Dr. Panagoda, over to you.
Thank you very much. Am I audible? Can you, yeah?
Yes.
And can you see my screen?
No, we cannot see your screen.
It says host disable attendee screen sharing. So if you can allow me to share the screen.
Yes. Can we make her a co-host? Pragya, can we make her a co-host?
Yes.
Yeah, the message is still, yeah.
Give me a moment.
Sorry.
You shared earlier when we practiced, no, Danny?
Yeah, I did, but now it says disabled.
Strange.
Mm-hmm.
You are a co-host.
If
now.
you can share, that's all right also for me.
Yes, you are a
Beena?
co-host.
Try now, Dayani.
Can you see?
Yes, we are starting to see something. Oh, then it not anymore.
Oh, but it doesn't come the sorry about it. You don't see the
Danny, I can share if you want.
yeah, please do so. Yeah. I'll stop sharing.
Yep.
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me, and let me present the resolution. But before doing that, I should acknowledge the fact that the contributions made by Ms. Visakha Dharmadasa from Colombo, from Sri Lanka, and her contributions to us drafting this resolution. And thank you for Sapan for having me presenting it. And here we go. South Asia Peace Action Network Resolution, Sunday, 29th March 2026. The South Asia Peace Action Network, Sapan, commemorating its 5th anniversary in March 2026, reaffirms its commitment to fostering meaningful dialogue, strengthening people-to-people and economic linkages, and promoting collaboration and cooperation across all areas in South Asia and beyond. While unequivocally condemning the violence and wars in our western borders that has regional and global consequences, we call for the governments of the region to take following measures. 1. Uphold UN Resolution 2032, the Indian Ocean as a zone of peace. The United Nations General Assembly Resolution 2832, adopted on 16 December 1971, must be implemented. This landmark resolution declared the Indian Ocean, including its waters, its airspace, and its ocean floor, a zone of peace. Today, as we observe the situation around us, both with concern and deep sense of responsibility, we respectfully call on all concerned states to renew their commitment to this vision. We encourage all states with interest in the Indian Ocean to implement the resolution in both letter and spirit, and to engage constructively in efforts that promote peace, stability, and mutual trust. Initiated by Sri Lanka and subsequently supported by the United Republic of Tanzania, the resolution called for measures to halt military escalation, eliminate foreign military presence, and ensure the area remains free from nuclear weapons. The Assembly also called upon the great powers to enter into consultations with the littoral states and the Indian Ocean to prevent any further escalation of their military presence in the area, and to work towards eliminating all bases, military installations, logistical supply facilities, nuclear weapons, and other weapons of mass destruction from the area. By the declaration, the Assembly further called upon the littoral and hinterland states of the Indian Ocean, the permanent members of the Security Council, and other major maritime users of the Indian Ocean to enter into consultations amid towards the implementation of the declaration, whereby warships and military aircraft would not use the Indian Ocean for any threat or use of force against any littoral or hinterland state. The right to free and unimpeded use of the zone by the vessels of all nations would be assured. International agreement would be reached for the maintenance of the Indian Ocean as a zone of peace. 2. Support Afghan women, resolve Pakistan-Afghanistan hostilities. We express solidarity with the women of Afghanistan who are facing gender apartheid under Taliban rule since August 2021. We condemn the misogynist policies of the regime, excluding women from political, economic, and cultural life of the country. We demand the immediate lifting of the ban on girls' education in Afghanistan, which violates the human rights of the girls and epitomizes the discrimination that is against all civilized norms. We condemn the bombing of the health facility in Kabul and call for ceasefire and opening of dialogue for peace between the two countries and a joint struggle against terrorism, which has been a menace for both countries. 3. Resolution 3. Please be release the incarcerated upon completion of jail terms, especially cross-border prisoners. We reiterate our call to governments of the region to release the incarcerated or completion of their jail terms, and to decriminalize inadvertent border crossings, especially for fisher folks and minors incarcerated in each other's country. Promptly return any fishing boats that are confiscated. Revive the India-Pakistan Joint Judicial Committee on Prisoners and allow medical teams of the other country to periodically visit and conduct inspections, institutions similar bilateral committees between India, Sri Lanka and India, Bangladesh, allow consular access to cross-border prisoners and communication between them and their relatives, including the option of online communication, allow those who are jailed in or who die in Sindh or Gujarat to be repatriated through the sea route or Kokrapa border rather than having to travel 1,000 kilometers upcountry to Wagah Atari border and then to their homes. Decriminalize inadvertent border settings. Number 4, revive cross-border trade, let people access medical facilities. We urge the governments to resume cross-border trade and let people access medical facilities. The suspension of traditional cross-border routes has harshly impacted the economy and border communities. These routes play a critical role in sustaining economies and the livelihoods of border communities. The humanitarian consequences of trade suspension have been severe, leaving thousands of workers unemployed, triggering price increases of essential goods, threatening food insecurity and limiting access to basic commodities and medicines. Perishable agricultural products have been lost, undermining the income of farmers and small traders. Those needing to travel for medical treatment also suffer as a result of the closure of these routes. Revive SAARC Summit. We call upon the governments of the region to find a mechanism to hold a summit of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. The 18th and most recent SAARC summit was held on 26-27 November 2014 in Kathmandu, Nepal, with the theme Deeper Integration for Peace, Progress and Prosperity. The 19th summit, scheduled for 2016 in Pakistan, was indefinitely postponed and needs to be urgently convened. So I think we will be adopting this today on 29th March 2026 by these networks, Sapan. Thank you very much. And resolution was drafted as you've seen. And thank you very much for having me to present it on behalf of Visakha.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dayaniji, for presenting this powerful resolution. Can we have a thumbs up or comments in the chat to signify your approval of the presentation? Thank you, everyone. We've almost reached the end of our program and we'll close on a musical note. The song we'll play now is called Azadi, co-written by partition scholar Amrita Ghosh. It is part of Ghost Pepper's debut album, No Borders. It's inspired by street chants across the subcontinent, calling for freedom from the many boundaries that divide us. Bilal, if you could please play that song.
forming inside the heart. Waves of freedom washing over when the music starts. Wave after wave keep rolling, will it ever stop? Bells of history keep tolling till they all ring out. Liberation.
Wow, that was really nice. The perfect ending. I'd like to now request all of the speakers, volunteers, and Sapan advisors to turn on their video cameras so we can take a virtual group photo. Can we do that? Beena or Pragya, will one of you click the photo?
Yeah. Pragya doesn't have a camera on, but video.
And Farhana also has her camera off. Farhana, do you want to be in the photo with us?
I just switched it on. Okay. Why it is unable to start it?
Sorry. Sorry, I think I might have switched off by mistake. 1 second.
Start video. I don't know why. Oh.
Lolly, are you going to turn your video on?
Oh, is it okay?
Yeah.
All right. Hi, everybody. Oh, it says unable to start. Okay. I think.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Done. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Before we close, a request to please contribute using the link in the chat to make a tax-deductible donation. Someone on our team will put up the link in the chat box again. Thank you. And a huge thanks to everyone who made this event possible and to all of you watching. Besides those who you saw on the screen today are many volunteers without whom we couldn't have done this. Special thanks to Sapan volunteers Sara, Dua, Bilal, and Pragyan. Thanks also for the inputs to the resolution. Afrasiab Khattak, Bushra Gohar, Visaka Dharmadasa, Lalita Ramdas, among others. And special thanks again to all our wonderful speakers, Beena, Pratibha, Naziba, Natasha, Ruchira, and Dayani ji. Thank you and look forward to seeing you next time. Remember to fill in the feedback form and contribute. Signing off from Dhaka.
We didn't make a feedback form.
Oh, oops.
Yeah.
Well, you can give us feedback anyway.
Feedback, yes.
Email us or send it via pigeons. I don't know.
Yes.
Well, signing off from Dhaka, I'm Sushmita Preetha. Goodbye for now and see you soon.
Thank you, Preetha. Pragya, you can stop the recording.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to take